I'm really excited to have Paul Merrick with me and also Arshad Ali. We've got some really exciting stuff to talk about this morning, all around commercial property and some live property deals that are being done at this precise moment. So really excited to get into that and to find out more information. So as always,
I can't speak for anybody else, but this is frozen for me.
What was that, Paul? Sorry?
Frozen for me, Emma.
We're
Said
all
you're
okay,
frozen
Paul.
for
You're
me.
just a bit more jittery. I think we may have to carry on as it is, if that's okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Emma.
Paul, can you hear us? I think he's now gone. We may have to carry on for a moment. Okay, so as I say, my name. Oh, we've lost Paul. Let's see.
The star of the show.
I know. Let's get him back on. Oh,
there we go. I've changed to a different internet connection, so hopefully we're all better, or at least it's better to me.
Yeah, no, that's much better. That's much better. So let's jump in and do an introduction, please. So, Paul, please introduce yourself and let everyone know. I'm sure lots of people do know you, but for anyone who doesn't.
Paul Merrick, based in Scotland. Been in business for 45 years now. Started my first business when I was 15, in case anybody wants to do the maths. I've been in the property industry for 3 decades as a developer of both residential and commercial property, in the process at the moment of selling up our debt-free property portfolio, as I spend more time being an angel investor and a business consultant. I think that about sums me up, Emma.
I love it. I love it. And I'm loving the fact that we're all so opposite in the country. I couldn't be more south and you are all very north. So Arshad, yes, introduction to you, please.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emma. Great to be here. Arshad Ali, actuary and property business owner. So I used to work as a manager at a supermarket and I knew there was something more. So I went back to university to study mathematics, statistics and finance. And using my shiny new degree, I became an actuary, and for those that don't know what an actuary is, that's, in Paul's words, a posh accountant. So where I'm now paid by major companies to manage the risk in their pensions, investments, and insurance portfolios. I started out with Scottish Widows, and now sort of senior director with Aviva on that. But coming back to property, at the same time, I built a 7-figure buy-to-let portfolio using private finance. And as oppressive as that sounds, the buy-to-let market has been very tumultuous for all of us. So once again, I knew I had to do something different. And as a direct result of working with Paul, most recently I've moved into the commercial space. So that's commercial to commercial, not commercial to resi. And in my spare time, I host a property network where, we provide that knowledge and support CPD for other people in property, and also chairman of a charity where we kind of provide the community inclusivity and mental well-being for children, roughly from the age of 4 up to 18, around 400 children every week. We provide things like football, girls football, and all those kind of sports to help them, bring them into the community.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Well, look, let's jump into this and find out a little bit more. So firstly, so obviously we're going to be talking about today a current property deal that literally is happening right now. And it's something that you guys, both of you, have been sort of working on. Can you give us a little bit, Paul, perhaps you could introduce us to how you guys know each other?
Me and Arshad first came across each other probably pre-pandemic, pre-lockdown. I was speaking at a couple of events, and I'd met Arshad at a couple of events I was speaking at. And to be honest, and to be completely frank, we weren't absolute lovers of each other when we first met. We kind of we perhaps rubbed against each other a little bit. But I think both of us seen that within the other person there was something there to be interested in and to get involved with. But it took us a number of years to actually make that happen. And in Arshad's case, kind of, very different journey that he chose to take than the one I would have ideally thought he should have taken. But we eventually kind of came across each other again, actually in Clubhouse, strangely enough, and we kind of got chatting, and he joined a few of the rooms because I used to run rooms on a regular basis in Clubhouse on a kind of weekend, on a Saturday morning and on the Sunday. And we kind of got to know each other a little bit more again, and he asked if he could work along with me if I would be his business consultant. So we took a look at his business, and whilst the business was doing relatively well, and this happens quite a lot, I find, when I kind of get involved with businesses. It's not that the business kind of is failing desperately that people take on a business consultant. Sometimes is, but it's mainly because they want to move to the next level, if that makes sense. So Arshad wanted to move to the next level. So we took a look at his business, and we found ways of kind of doing that relatively quickly. In fact, from memory, Arshad, I think within the first kind of 3 months of working with me, you had made 30 to 40,000 pounds on top of what you were originally making. Is that about right?
Well, that's on the button, and it wasn't just on top, it was actually money in the bank, which is what kind of blew my mind at the time.
And we've went on together to work together now for almost a year, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, a year.
And his business has moved and progressed all the time. And I thought when you gave me the opportunity to come and speak with you today, Emma, that I would invite Arshad along, because I think it's always interesting, when people are talking about a live deal, if you like, something that's literally just happened. And whilst I have a career of deals, and I'm always involved in deals, in fact, I've physically just done one myself today, but I think it's always interesting to kind of talk about, what's happening right now, not what happened last year or, 10 years ago, but what's happening right now. So Arshad, if he wants to give a brief introduction of himself, will tell you that he's been involved in the kind of buy-to-let sector for a number of years. And whilst that has been relatively successful, I think there's one deal that he's doing at the moment will actually overshadow or make more money in plain English than all of those deals put together. And would that be about right, Arshad?
That is indeed, Paul. Thank you for that introduction. I think it's good to kind of explain where I was coming from before I started working with you, just to give everyone a bit of context, because it was the BRR strategy. I don't know if you've heard.
Oh no, now we're losing Arshad as well.
Heard of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm sure a few of the people watching will be familiar with that. So essentially, it was buying a property below market value, doing a refurb on it, and then putting a tenant in, which is all fantastic and amazing. But I didn't realize at the time that I was actually in a very fortunate economic period that the interest rates were so low. So it didn't really matter what I was doing, because there'd be that cash flow at the end. And over the last couple of years, you've seen what's happened to the interest rates as they rise and rise. That's put a real squeeze on the cash flow in the buy-to-let sector. So what was probably a really very profitable business I thought I had, I just seen the margins get lower and lower. And it's one of those ones where that's what kind of prompted me to go, right, is this the best place for me? And as Paul pointed out, if you're in the mire or if you're stuck in, you can't really see the wood for the trees or the path out. And that's when sometimes you need someone to come in and go, here's where you're going wrong, or let's have a look at this and how we can twist and turn things. And as a result of, almost the first 3 or 4 months working with Paul, we generated £30,000 into my bank account instantly, which was, if I'm being honest, almost as much as I was making from the buy-to-let, so not far off after all expenses. So it just shows you the difference it can make working with the right people there.
Amazing.
So
and so you spoke, sorry, about, Paul's obviously spoken about how you've met, etc. Now, taking on a business consultant, one, you've got to make that decision. And then two, choosing that person, because it's going to be an investment in yourself as well. What helped you kind of to make the move on both those areas?
I think the first one is honesty of where you are and where you're going, to kind of go, right, is this it? Is this where I want to be? Now, you've probably seen from me, if something isn't working, I take a step back and go, right, what can I do to take the next step? So when I was a manager at a supermarket, I decided to go back to university, get that extra education and move on. Whereas in business, you don't quite have that same, you can bring in that expertise from externally. And that's what made me think, do you know what? There's something here that I don't quite understand. How can I go to the next level? And having been in the clubhouse rooms with Paul, the respect that he's got, and also the 45 years of business experience, 30 years in property experience, I thought, there's a man I could learn something from. And
I also think for me is a lot of people do a lot of the same stuff. And, as multiple people have said, it's actually great to look at those people who are doing something different, who maybe look at things really differently. And that's what I've learned from Paul, is he'll certainly see things quite differently and be brutally honest, in the nicest possible way. I know there's been a couple of sort of things he said to me that at that moment was quite brutal. But since then, it's been like, wow, that has been really instrumental in really changing the way that I look at property, I look at business, I look at myself. So yeah, it's tremendously interesting, isn't it, to have that?
Yeah, just like you've kind of pointed out, I think there's that the difference between working with Paul and I've found with others in the past is he doesn't actually tell you what to do. I don't know if you found that. It's more kind of help you connect the dots. So that way you can go away and implement, rather than always have to, oh, Paul, can you feed me the next line? Or what do I do here? He's not very much, it's almost like he's helped me understand and see the bigger picture. But also importantly, help me join the dots between them rather than just tell me what to do. How did you find it, Emma?
Jerry, can I just say there, and we don't want to get bogged down in the difference between a business consultant and maybe a mentor or a trainer. But I was speaking to somebody yesterday and I was saying that one of the things you have to be able to do as a business consultant, and I said it in a kind of humorous style just to kind of get the message across, was this: I quite often have to go into people's business and say, you've got an ugly baby. And few people actually want to tell people they've got an ugly baby, and even fewer people want to hear they have an ugly baby, right? Yeah. But it's a business consultant's job to go in and spot A, how ugly the baby is, B, tell you that you have an ugly baby, and C, tell you that the baby needs plastic surgery. Right? and that's the job, right, of a business consultant. And it's very different, say, for example, to a mentor, because a mentor, we're kind of looking at what a mentor's done and then we're trying to emulate that. Now, whether we can or whether we can't, it's a big question in mentoring. Can I ever really be Emma? We're so different. So I'll always be a poor version of Emma, and Emma would be a poor version of me. Whereas a business consultant, you're not trying to be them. In no way, shape or form is Arshad trying to be me. But he's trying to learn from, the skills that you learn as a business consultant. And one of those skills, and it was really interesting when I looked at Arshad's business, is I said, in business terms, you've got an ugly baby, right? And here's what's ugly about your baby. And here's what we talked about. We talked about his business model. And it's interesting because lots of people are in business right now, today, as we speak, listening to this, hopefully. And they don't know what their business model is. In fact, many of them don't understand they have a business model. And every business has a business model. And the difference is, you know, when you bring a business consultant in, is you decide what the business model is and then you implement it. Whereas most people have found themselves in a business model that they didn't plan to be in. And why Arshad could take, you know, what he was saying is, you know, I think what he was saying is that £30,000 that he earned in the first few weeks and the more money that he's went on to earn, right, outweighs what he earned in buy to let over a long period of time. Because he didn't really have a business model in the buy to let. And when we looked at his business model and we said, well, look, if we just change this and we just change that, because another thing that a kind of business consultant does is they kind of take life like a Rubik's Cube and they say, look, if we just turn this way and we just turn this way and they just turn that way, all the colours are right. But if you've got one section of the Rubik's Cube turned wrong, the whole thing's wrong. And all we did was a simple click, wasn't it? Really, it was a very simple click, Arshad, wasn't it? Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it just all came to light very, very quickly. And
but
we're doing
that. Sorry, okay.
And we're doing that now with the property side of his business. Sorry, your question, Emma.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it often takes, you know, somebody who has that more experience, who has you know, been there, done it, potentially seen other people do it, and you know, that helicopter look on somebody else. Because even if you're, you know, you might work on your business, you might work in your business, but you don't necessarily know what you don't know. And I was just laughing. Richard has just said, "Ugly baby." That's what my sister said about me. So that's quite funny. But yeah, I mean, and I think what is really key, and you know, really talk about it a lot, Paul, is that most people in property talk about property and they don't talk about this business. And I know for me, working with you a bit last year, Paul, is this year I feel so much better because I feel I've got a business model. I've got something to follow. And it literally follows, you know, it has a sales marketing department. It has this, it has logistics. It has all of these things, which before in property, I just could not see that. So this is where, for you look at things very much from a business perspective, which it should be. I know that sounds crazy when you say it out loud. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it makes such a difference to be looking at it this way. Okay, well,
and it's that ability, you know, what does a business consultant bring, whether it's myself or an other, right, is we've actually studied business. You know, while we're taking that helicopter view, as you call it, you know, we're looking down on something we understand because we've actually spent a long time studying business. You know, I done my first business study course when I was 18, and I can tell you that's a number of years ago, Emma. And I've done a lot since. You know, I'm currently studying online with Harvard. I'm still studying business at this ripe old age because business is changing all the time. But I think it'd be good, given the time, if we if we talk to Arshad about the deal that he did. I think you signed the paperwork on Friday, if I remember correctly, Arshad, and the counterpart, I think, was signing their paperwork today.
Yes, Paul. You know, it's actually, there's a number of deals that we're doing just now at the moment, but that's probably the one of the ones I'm most excited about. So I think that's a good one to kind of touch on. So there's a commercial property, and the current market value on that property is around 550,000. And as Paul said, we just paid on Friday 300,000. And you know, we're going to do some work on the property, and importantly, it's a commercial to commercial, not a commercial to resi. So I know when we're talking about businesses, one of the things that's really kind of come to the fore for me, and that's working with Paul, is that understanding the average customer value. So here, the average customer value will be roughly £40,000 per annum. And we're going to probably bring in around about 3 customers. So that'll be around £120,000 per year, you know, with all the customers that we're bringing in. And, you know, in the past, I'd kind of talk about rents and percentage returns, but I think that all falls away because when you talk about customer value, that's because we're building a real business, and each of those customers will be bringing in roughly £40,000 per annum. And then we are going to do some work on the property as well. So, it's not just that. And we'll add about £60,000 of value to the bricks and the mortar. And so that, if you add all that up, that'll be probably in excess of £1 million will be the bricks and mortar value. But I'm really excited about the business underneath and the long-term customers.
You said 60,000, and I think you've kind of under the pressure of speaking. You mean 600,000?
Yeah, I think because 550 plus 60 doesn't quite add up to $1 million
exactly,
plus, does it?
Yeah.
I'd added it up as well and was thinking I got that a bit wrong.
Yeah. So being an actuary, yeah, I've shot myself there.
Yes. So you've got to remember, that Arshad isn't necessarily one of those people who puts as an accountant, a posh accountant. He's not necessarily putting himself forward. You know the old joke about accountants, don't you?
No, come on, tell me.
How do you know when you've met an extrovert accountant?
No idea.
He looks at your shoes. so Arshad isn't used to being kind of in the limelight, and I think he's been quite pressured by it.
Oh,
But he meant 600,000.
Yeah.
And to touch on his point of kind of like customer value, because I think this is one of the things that people don't necessarily understand about commercial property. If you've got a buy to let, it doesn't matter whether it's a road sweeper that lives in that, or whether it's a major consultant, a doctor, or a brain surgeon. They will pay you roughly the same amount of rent. But with commercial property, you can change the value of the property substantially by bringing in a higher paying tenant. And you say, well, why would one particular business pay more than another? Well, if you take it a location, the location that he's currently got at the moment, it's an engineering company that's in it, but it's a prime location. Now, an engineering company doesn't have to be in a prime location, so they won't pay a prime location rent, if that makes sense. But when that engineering company moves out, and it's food retail that's coming in, and when the food retailers come in, they will pay a much larger rent than that engineer would, because they are paying for the footfall, the location of the property. And that's one of the really interesting things about commercial property that Arshad didn't initially understand, that you could have the same property in the same location, but because you've changed the end use and the end user, and that company makes much more money because they're there than the other company would. It doesn't matter where an engineer is, he can only make X. His location doesn't make a great deal of difference. But when you've got a retail outlet, then their location makes a big difference. If you've got a retail outlet in a main location, they will do much better than a secondary location. And this happens to be a main location with what we would class in commercial as a secondary tenant. So that tenant can be moved and will be moved, and Arshad will assist that move and still make money from that tenant. Money will still be made from that tenant, but you bring in a new tenant whose that location suits better, who can make more money in that location and will pay more money for that location. And that's a business model.
Yeah.
That's it. That's something that Arshad, this is the first one that he's done, but he can repeat that. So he can find commercial businesses that are, quote, in the wrong location, help relocate them, and then bring a better business in that will pay a higher rent in the new location. And what's really interesting about that, and this is another thing about kind of value, if you like, in businesses, is that by bringing good quality tenants in there, what we would call blue chip tenants in there, he doesn't only increase the value of the property, but if he was then to sell that as an entity, as a business, he's increased the value of the business. So in round numbers, and come into this anytime you like, Arshad, because I don't want to speak for you, but I'm very conscious that I speak for a living, and you're an accountant.
It's all right. I'll shut him up in a minute, Arshad. Don't worry. Don't worry.
No, it's fine. Do you know what it is? It's I think it's I'm really excited about the deal, and then obviously being here, sharing it with yourself as well. So that's all just kind of come together. But one thing I'm comfortable with is the numbers. So as Paul was saying, just to go back to the point he was making about the customer value, one of the things that we're planning to do is help assist that secondary tenant with a new location, bring in the blue chip companies that will be willing to pay a premium for being in that location. So if that business is bringing in the customer values of 120,000 a year, the plan would be, if we ran it for a couple of years, to prove the value of those customers to outside people looking in, so they would see the revenue coming in of the customer value as well as the assets that's there. So as we said, with the bricks and mortar, that we're buying it roughly 550, and it'll be worth over circa $1 million. So putting that all together, we could probably go on to sell that business for sort of 2 million in and around there plus. And in the past, if I'm being brutally honest, I would have never thought about the customer value. I would have I've always just focused on the bricks and mortar. But you can see how if all I did was focus on the bricks and mortar and just see the increase of £600,000, I would have been blinded to almost double, treble that profit of what the business can achieve, how the business is so much more valuable than just the bricks and mortar.
And on top of that, I think it would be maybe pertinent as well for those people who, commercial property is totally new to them, and perhaps come from your background, Arshad, of buy-to-lets, residential, HMOs, whatever that might be, is also the real differences between residential and commercial. So obviously, in residential, the tenant tends to have a lot more of the protection. We may have noticed that. The landlord, we hear all about, don't we, anti-landlord taxes, and there's an awful lot. So, you really have to be, tenant focused. Obviously, you want to provide a really great service, but you can be really messed around by a tenant, because tenants can be bad tenants. Of course, I'm sure there are the odd bad landlord as well. Whereas in the commercial world, it's completely turned on its head, isn't it? So you have these kind of FRI. So you have an agreement, which is a fully repair and insuring agreement, where they look after everything, basically. They obviously insure it, they repair it, all of those kind of things. Can you see any other things for you that has been a drastic difference, in going down this commercial route, as far as maybe day-to-day, just the calmness of the business? Because I would imagine a buy-to-let business, although you've got people maybe staying for a long time, can have some issues. Maybe a fence that's blown over. Maybe this has happened, that has happened. Whereas in a commercial, it's a bit more of a restful business.
Yeah, so you make some fantastic points there, Emma. I mean, one of the things that I kind of share from my personal experience is, up in Scotland, we've got a rent cap of 3% or 6% if you can prove financial difficulty. So you can imagine how, as the interest rates and mortgages, you're having to fund your own portfolio because of or a squeeze on the cash flow. So once again, whereas on the commercial side, you've got the increases written into the leases before you've even signed on the dotted line, and that's protected as well. Whereas on the residential side, you're at the whims of what the government and the legislation dictates. Also, we have an eviction ban at the moment as well, and that makes it difficult. Even if you've got a problem tenant and there's a reason, you've got legitimate reasons that you want control of your property back. So there's just a lot more moving parts. But I think the biggest difference, and this is what Paul alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, I was just playing at a much smaller scale. of what I could do and what I could achieve, because I was bringing in a couple of £100 from a property each month. I thought I was doing okay, and I thought that'd be enough. But really, when you compare it with the deals that I'm doing now, with Paul and my business consultant, we're talking about, it took me 5 or 6 years to build a portfolio of 7 figures. Of 75% of that belongs to the bank, and a few people might share that. Whereas now we're going to have a property that's where we've added £600,000 of profit. But on top, we've got the customer value, and it's a business. So can you see how they're just, playing at that smaller scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just to go back and reiterate what you were saying then. So with regards to tenants, a buy-to-let tenant, if what you were saying is if something happens to your buy-to-let tenant and you want them to your property and you need them to move out for whatever reason, is pretty much could be it could be very, very challenging to get them out. It can take a long time. With your commercial tenant, you have contracts in place, you have agreements. If they don't pay the rent, you change the locks and they can't come in. It's very, very specific. So there are so many incredible sort of benefits. And then on top of that, if you happen to have your own business, you could always rent out a bit of your own business as well, for your own business in there. So there's just a huge amount of massive benefits to do that. So yeah, so let's now talk about how you found it, how this came about. What where was it? Just on the open market?
Is not necessarily and the people that you're having the conversations with and who you're working with. So before, in the past, I'd be, I don't want to say foraging in the bin, so to speak, for the next buy-to-let, but you get what I mean. You're kind of down and dirty and having to kind of umpteen property visits and whatnot. Whereas commercial property, by the time you see it in the market, it's already too late. So you really need to have the connections and to be working with the right people in order to get the introductions, so that you can get in first, so to speak. So these kind of deals, even if an agent had it, they're unlikely to bring it to the likes of you and me. It's having those back connections and having the right people, working with the right people. That's how you get these kind of deals.
So this is how it happened, was it? It was over a period of time building up, relationships with commercial agents and things like that?
Well, not only commercial agents, but also, it's working with the likes of people like Paul. So he could kind of guide me and nudge me along the way, as well as to what would be sort of fruitful places to have conversations with, and how to kind of steer those, because he's done multiple deals at multi-million pounds. So things like this are like a walk in the park for someone like him to kind of help guide me.
So what would you advise on that, Paul, as far as, finding people to help you out? And also, is there kind of like, you're quite specific. Presumably you need to be really clear. It's almost like a template. This is what I'm looking for. Is that how you go about it?
I think that, so this particular deal kind of went through a journey, as most deals do, but this one originally went to administrators and was bought from administrators. And that's not going through agents. There was never an agent involved in this deal at all, and it was never on the market. It was a deal done from one person to another. In fact, with this particular deal, Arshad, there wasn't even anybody else in the picture, was there? You weren't competing. There was no kind of competing with other buyers. You were, you had the field open to yourself. Oh, sorry, we seem to have lost Arshad. So a lot of it is about, as Arshad said, and I like to think I helped him a little bit with this, but he did the hard work. But a lot of it's about cultivating the right relationships with the right people. We talk a lot, particularly in property and in business, about networking, right? But it's where you network, who you network with, and how much time you spend with individuals. In this case, Arshad spent quite a lot of time with the individuals concerned to make sure that he wasn't the head at the head of the pack. He was the pack. And do you know, I spent a lifetime in property buying things that weren't for sale for amounts of money that people didn't want to take, right? And people always say, well,
I want to be writing these down, all these little snippets that he comes out with.
Well, how do you do that, right? And it's about, you know, it's an old cliche, but it's true if you do it well. It's about relationship building.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But for you, Paul, is it really, you know, the model that you are looking for is literally like you spoke about earlier? It's looking for you know, commercial properties where there clearly are what, let's call them B type companies in a prime location, and that's where you see, you know, that opportunity.
Well, for Arshad, I mean, you know, my business is got its own kind of there's 4 business models inside of my business, but let's talk about Arshad's business, which I think is much more interesting at the moment in this interview. Arshad has 3 separate business models, all within inside the one business. And that's very important. So he has an aspect of his business that's about bringing investors, bringing, you know, partners, business partners in, and giving them a really good return on their money. I think in this one, Arshad, you kind of, or in your business generally, you're looking at returns for people who have come somewhere between 10 and 30% at the moment, aren't you?
Yes. So based on, you know, with the buy-to-lets, it was a lot lower, so kind of just under 10, whereas now we've moved on to the bigger projects. So there's a bit more risk involved, but, you know, where isn't there risk? But the returns kind of are between 10 to 30% because we're doing projects that can pay for those kind of returns, if you get what I mean. Whereas in the past, I couldn't pay those returns because there wasn't enough in them to pay those kind of.
Yeah, and definitely. And that's good to hear that, you know, you talk about that, these large returns in that commercial space that is more likely to have a definite road, a definite path. You can see it clearly. Whereas somebody was telling me the other day that they had, you know, they were being offered 16% for a bungalow conversion. And, you know, there was just alarm bells that there just is not going to be enough money in that to be able to support returning an investor of that. So it's really key that every person in a chain, in a business, needs to understand what they're going into as well. So it's, you know, it's really key that you, not only are people going to be able to invest confidently in you, because one, you can explain it, you can, you know, take them through the deal. You've got somebody supporting you in Paul, and they can actually see the facts and figures. Whereas, you know, it's quite scary when some people throw themselves into something. It all might sound quite nice. Oh, I'm getting massive amount of return for your money. But if there's no money for you to get from that deal, it's not going to happen, is it? So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So that's the one arm. You've got your investors. Then you said there was 3, Paul.
And then he's got his commercial aspect, which lots of people still, I mean, more and more people are getting into commercial now. And we're talking about, I see in the chat, we're talking about things like SaaSes. And obviously, you know, because of Arshad's background, he currently works for kind of one of the biggest pension companies in the world. As an actuary, and he understands the whole pension world and the SaaS world. And that's another aspect to it, is this idea that he's beginning to understand commercial, but he's always understood, because of his day job, if you like, the role that pensions can have in commercial that they can't have in residential, or shouldn't have in residential. And then the third and final aspect of it is that he has the business model of an exit plan, because many people get into property with an entrance door, but there's no exit door. Whereas every time that Arshad is building one of these models, he is seeing that he won't own that forever. You know, this idea that will go to his children and his grandchildren that people quite often have in property. Arshad sees it much more as a business that he will be in for a number of years, add value to that business, and then sell it. And that's one of the huge advantages about commercial property, is if you think about having a portfolio of 10 residential properties with, you know, 10 tenants in them, if you said that those properties were worth £10 million, £1 million each, the actual properties themselves. Oh, we seem to have then if you went to sell them in the open market, it's very unlikely anybody would want to pay you more than the market value of the property. In fact, if you had a sitting tenant, they might want to pay you less than the market value of the property. Whereas commercial is exactly opposite than that. You have a good commercial property with a good quality tenant in it, with a long FRI lease. Not only do you get the value of the property, but you get the value of the business. So you might not get that if you've got one commercial property, but you have 10 commercial properties, you then have a business. And people will say, right, okay, well, those 10 properties, the bricks and mortar are worth £10 million, because that's the kind of average that Arshad's now working on, £1 million a property, as opposed to a few £100,000 a property, £1 million a property. 10 properties producing, you know, £1 million a year, because this one will produce just over £100,000 per annum in rent. You don't ask somebody for 10 million, you ask somebody for 20 million because they're buying a business.
Yeah, incredible. I'm just reading Adrian. I think maybe having a slight rant, but he is saying, and I think Paul, I'm sure you'll have a good response to this. He said, finding both a good enough, lucrative deal as well as qualifying investors is also impossible. I have found that's quite a strong word there, isn't it? And I think in the word of what is it? If you say you can or you say you can't, you're right. So be careful of the words we use.
Yes, it was Henry Ford who said.
Henry Ford, that was it. Yeah.
Who said, yeah, if you believe you can, you're right, and if you believe you can't, you're right as well. Right. Yeah. Impossible's a big word. I mean, you know, impossible's difficult to do. I can usually only manage impossible on Wednesdays. But is it difficult? Of course it's difficult, or everybody would do it. And one of the problems with buy to let at the moment is everybody's doing it, right? If you want easy, then there's a million things you can do out there. They're not very profitable, but they're easy. And then there's a few things that you can do that are not very easy, but they're profitable. And what you get to decide as a business person is, do you want to do easy that doesn't make very much money, or do you want to do difficult that makes a lot of money? So I don't think Arshad or me are saying this is easy. But if you want easy, sorry, what was the chap's name?
Adrian.
Then go get a job, Adrian. That's easy. Businesses, there's things that you can do that are easy that don't make a lot of money, and there are things that you can do that aren't easy that make a lot of money. That's the choice we get to make as business people.
But I also think that, you know, we talk about things that are easy and difficult, but inherently I would imagine, Arshad, and correct me if I'm wrong, but everything that Paul has asked you to do, it hasn't been, you know, jumping out of an aeroplane without a backpack on. You know, it hasn't been.
You clearly don't know Paul well enough, do you?
You know, but everything that he's asked you to do, inherently.
I'm still alive, Emma. That's what it is. I'm still alive in front of you, but yeah, I get the point that you're trying to make there. It's definitely not easy, and you know, how shall I put it? I used to think I was smart before I met Paul. And I think that gives you a lot of insight. You know, I'm a senior director at Aviva, you know, and, you know, 6 figures, whatnot, salary, etc. So, you know, I'm not really a dumb kid off the block. But I used to think I was smart before I started working with Paul. And now he's just opened my eyes, because I just one wee thing there that a lot of people seem to do, and that I did as well, was focus on the bricks and mortar. Whereas you can see today, we're talking about customer value. We're talking about, you know, business returns, exiting businesses. None of this generational nonsense, that the little dream that I used to have kind of thing. You know, whereas now, this is how a proper business, these multinational, so dare I say, £1 million companies operate at, that I've been at the coalface of. Now I get to see how they do it, but have someone that can guide me, that I can create that myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely incredible. So Adrian has mentioned that he does have a job, and he does understand that mindset is one thing, but he said the realities is another. So like all these things, I think for me, it is literally, if you think you can and you think you can't, then you're right. And I even my 7-year-old has
touching on that, Emma. You know, you can't really say it's impossible because I'm sitting here right in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely, can things go wrong? So, you know, I've had numerous deals. I mean, Paul has seen me go through various things. Numerous deals go wrong. And literally this last week, I had a deal that has been on the table for 18 months, and had the person who'd accepted our offer 18 months ago, they would have got, oh God, they would have got over £100,000 more. But because they left it, and the market has gone down and down and down, and they're making like so little money compared to what they would have done, because now the building is not worth what it was, which is just, you know, a crying shame. But, you know, we're still able to help them get the best they can at the moment, because we're able to look at doing something a bit different with it. So, yeah, there's always things. Everyone only sees this, don't they? I think, Arshad. So they only see you coming on and saying, look at this, I've done this, I've made 40 grand, I've added on this. And they go, oh, well, they've managed it. I tried, you know, looking on, you know, wherever, and it didn't happen. But the difference is what you've done is you built a business, you know, you went out and you built your property portfolio, saw that it wasn't quite working for you, and then has gone out and thought, well, what else can I do? Who else has done something that I can follow in their footsteps, or I can ask for advice? You've then, I'm sure you didn't only speak to Paul, you would have spoken to lots and lots of different people, got lots of feedback, and found somebody that you felt could help you. And then in that time, and on top of that, Arshad, you've done as you were suggested, or you led that way, rather than going, oh no, that's not right. And I think that's what some people do. If they say, go and do that, you have gone and done that. And that's why you're now here, you know, in this successful position.
Thank you for that, Emma. And I think you captured a lot of that, the hard work that's been involved in there, quite succinctly. But one of the things I kind of want to point out, slightly different to maybe how others do it, is for me, once I got talking and working with Paul, I knew there wasn't anyone else I wanted to work with. So for someone as an actuary that does all this due diligence and, you know, testimonials, and how have you found working with, but I just knew straight away just the caliber of person he is. And you'll have heard it yourself in this for the last 45 minutes. I'm sure there'll be some people that haven't stopped writing, you know, the nuggets that Paul's dropped just on. Yes, exactly. So if you know what you're waiting for. You know, it's one of those things, because for me, I couldn't see. So just that was the only point. But otherwise, yes, it's one of those, he helps you connect the dots, and you've got to put it into action. Because if you don't, then you just sit on the internet and moan about how things are, maybe, dare I say, impossible.
Arshad asked me a question recently, to be honest with you, because I'm very selective. I only work with about 10 clients a year. And I think I've had 37 clients approach me last year, and I ended up working with 6. I don't always work with 10 either. I work with the number that are the right people. And Arshad actually asked me, after he spoke to a couple of people who had tried to work with me and it didn't work out for either of us. It just wasn't a good fit, if that makes sense, Emma. And he said, so why did you work with me, Paul? And why do you continue to work with me? I said, you've got 2 things that I really admire, Arshad. And this maybe touches on where other people are lacking something and why it's not working for them. I don't know. Right. 1, he's hardworking. He doesn't give up. He's not one of those, you know, you've seen the cartoon where they're just, you know, one more hit with a pick and they'll get through to the diamond, but they walk away. Right. You know, he's not one of those. He will persist and persist and persist. And he persisted for a period in time about working with me. And 2, Arshad doesn't want it. He needs it. And they're the 2 things that I love in a client. 1, they will work really hard. They will do what it takes. They won't complain about what it takes. They'll just do it. Right. You know, lots of people complain about what it takes to be successful, and other people just do what it takes to be successful. And 2, this isn't something he wants. This is something, you know, if you looked at his family background and you looked at the fact his dad was a bus driver, and yet, you know, he works for, you know, substantial like six-figure sums. He went to university, you know, he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he created one, right? And that's what I want in a client. I want them to really need to be successful because they're the people who work hard enough to do it.
Yeah, I really love that. And I do, you know, that whole kind of grain of, you know, line of gold in the ground, and you know that one person is getting so close. So you know, I've got a few people at the moment in the rent to rent world, and they're literally just so close. And you can see people like yourself, Arshad. I'm sure you've got to the stage where you've just thought, oh my gosh, I just can't see a way around this. But you just got to keep going. You just got to keep doing whatever it takes. And that's where having perhaps somebody else, you know, like Paul or whomever, to say, yeah, you're just knocking on the wrong, you know, the wrong thing. So it's like the, oh gosh, I'm going to forget his name. Is the book nearby? But it's basically a story of a fly. Yeah. And you basically, don't you see the fly flying into the window. Yeah. And literally 2 feet away is an open door. But that fly will bet its life on trying harder. It's trying as hard as it can, can't it? And it will literally die through trying so hard to get through that window. And that's where you need somebody to come in and look at you and say, just look over there, 2 foot away, and you actually go and get the outside. And that, you know, and that is where we really need that kind of help, support, guidance, all of those kind of things.
I remember having a conversation with my brother, and he talked about opportunity constantly knocking on my door. You know, he said to me, you know, it just seems like opportunity just knocks at your door, Paul. And I said, yeah, I built the door. That's the difference. You know, opportunity can't knock on your door unless you build the door.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, let's hear about anything else to share. Arshad, is there kind of another deal you want to talk about? Is there kind of like, you know, the investors that you're working with? What in this last few minutes, what would you like to have a talk about?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly touching on the point that you mentioned about the fly. And, you know, earlier on, we talked about the helicopter position that someone like Paul can take. The thing is, when I was doing the buy-to-let, it felt like I was in a maze and I didn't know the way out. Whereas if you've got someone in a helicopter that's looking down on it, that's got the experience, they can just nudge you and direct you in the right direction to get out of that maze so you can go on to do, you know, these kind of commercial deals and projects. But as I said, we're doing a couple of deals. So one of the other deals that we're doing is, once again, is another commercial project. We've kind of picked up for 120,000. We're going to do £80,000 worth of work on it. And that'll, you know, bricks and mortar, once again, it's about 200,000, it'll be about 250,000. So there's not much value in there. But working with Paul, the magic and one of the reasons why to kind of go down that route is the customer value on this one is roughly 36,000 per annum. So once again, if you add those multipliers in, once that business is up and running and we're proving the customer value once again on that may be worth maybe 300,000 or even more. Whereas in the past, I would have just focused in on the little, you know, I've not created much equity here. You know, there's not worth doing this deal, and I would have just walked away from something like that. And as a result, you're right, my investors are benefiting too, because we kind of do it based on the project returns now, rather than like a fixed return that was less than 10% because I didn't really know how to unlock these bigger returns. So our investors are benefiting as well. I mean, an example is someone that was a GP and they had a sort of stressful job and they wanted to kind of go away and pursue a passion. So they invested some money with us. What we've done is they get that annual return of roughly £30,000 per year. And that might be a lot for some, and it might not be much for others. But what it does mean is he can go on and actually now gets more than what he used to before, combined with everything else he does. And all he's had to do is have that kind of faith with us, and he's just reinvested year on year. So that's the kind of difference we can make in people's lives as well. And that's what really kind of ignites and brings it all together is there's a win for ourselves, a win for the investors that come on board, and then I'm really excited to where we're going to go.
Yeah, it sounds like what I'm listening to, Arshad, and it's kind of come around in a big circle, because I think you did actually mention it in the beginning, is that you have had a major shift in kind of, you were kind of here, and now your expectations are kind of, so I suppose when you're starting out in a career and you're earning, I don't know, 20 grand a year, and then, you know, over the years, you may now be earning 150,000 a year. And so, you know, that's kind of normal now. That is your norm. So it seems to me you've had this kind of real jump to a different type of deal that is now your norm. And even that, you're continuing to want to stretch, and the people you're talking to, what you're offering them, all of those kind of things is just been a complete turnaround, so to speak.
I think I hadn't actually thought of it like that before, but it's one of the things I'm going to kind of listen again to this episode is, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And as much as I don't like using that, you know, that Grant Cardone 10X kind of thing, you know, it makes me a little bit sick. But that's really what you've just described there. You know, in a short space of time, we went from a level that was good to now what we're going towards is great. You know, we're kind of adding zeros at the end of what we were doing. So it's working smarter, we're getting rewarded for that hard work. And I can only sort of put that down to working with Paul for me.
Amazing. Paul, we're coming nearly to the end now. What any advice that you would give to anyone, any encouragement about going into the commercial property world? Anything that you'd like to add in there?
I think I'm going to finish with 3 key points, and I think this is going to sum up this whole kind of interview, because it's not really about one particular deal that Arshad's doing or one particular client that, you know, that's benefited from it. It's about seeing what you do having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Seeing it as a business. You know, where do I start this business, right? Do I start this business by getting out there and getting it all done, right? Which is where most people want to start. Or do I start that business by actually sitting down and building a solid business plan that gives me a direction that I can follow? Because I've been in business for 45 years, and I can assure you that in that time I have found many, many shiny pennies that could have taken me off in a completely different direction. You know, I call it the difference between being on the motorway and being on the B road. And you're on the motorway and suddenly you're distracted off onto a B road that's sometimes a dead end, right? So writing that business plan and following that business plan and having a business model in the first place is key number 1. Key number 2 is not being satisfied. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Not being satisfied. Surely we all want to be satisfied. You find a satisfied business person, you find somebody who's stopped achieving. So not being satisfied, saying there's more. And 3, and this is a big concept, but I want to put it into small words. There's no reason why I can't do that. Because most of us, all the time, or at least that little man in the back of our heads, that we don't admit exists to anybody, that little person who tells us you can't be, you shouldn't be, you don't deserve to be. At some point in life, if you want to be successful, you have to tell that voice in the back of your head to shut up. And you have to move on and say, do you know what? I can, I will, and I'm going to be. And I just want to say to the chap in the audience who has, you know, put a great deal into this and said a great deal in the comments, we've never met. But I would suggest that the man in the back of your head, that person in the back of your head, his voice is right now is bigger than the voice in the front of your head that says, I can, I will, and I'm going to. Because all of us at some point in our life or throughout our whole life have that little person in the back of our head being the big voice. And we need to be the big voice in our life. We need to be the star of our movie. We need to be the person who says, I can, I'm going to, and I will. And Arshad took that step a few months ago, not because he worked with me, but because he realised that he could. And he was going to. And he's now doing it.
Love it. I love it. What was that thing that you said to me, Paul? Something about being successful. Some people are successful and have failures, and then others have failures that have. What's that one? Can you remember?
We look at ourselves. We look at ourselves and we see one of two things. We either see a failure who sometimes succeeds, or we see a success who occasionally fails.
See, that's been huge for me. That was one of those blunt things, Arshad, that Paul said to me. And even literally this last week, somebody, I saw them, and they're a very successful property investor. And he said, and somebody said, oh, in your, we were talking about goals and stuff like that. And he said, the one thing that's really important to me is, he said, that every day is a success. And that kind of just brought it straight back, and it reminded me of my success journal and all of those kind of things, to know that it's our choice. No matter what happens in a day, we choose it to be a success or not. And that is, an incredibly powerful. Well, look, guys, thank you. That's been an absolutely awesome insight, Arshad. Really great to meet you. I cannot wait. We'll have to get you on again, see how these deals are going. And if I'm ever up in Scotland, which isn't often at the moment, but anyway, I'll have to come up and catch up and have a look round. And as always, Paul, thank you again for sharing such pearls of wisdom, and a really beautiful closing as well. Then I really appreciate that. So and
taking time out, because people have probably noticed and thinking, where is he? As he sits in his kind of 7.4 meter long motorhome. Why is he sitting in a motorhome? Because when you get the success that you deserve, and the success that you want, and the success that you work for, you can work from wherever you want to, whenever you want to. And more importantly than both of those things, and nobody makes enough fuss about this, you can work with whoever you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, guys. And next week I'm back again, and I am talking to Chris Moran, who is the person leading the way in creating trust. Basically having trust in your hospitality business through iPrac. So we'll look forward to chatting to him next time. Oh, Patricia says we've missed you on Clubhouse. Jason has said freedom. So we love that. So thank you so much, guys. And we really appreciate everyone who commented. Thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.